And this is what the far left does. When you criticize it, it calls you a racist or a homophobe or whatever. You know what they do. So Ocasio-Cortez says, quote, "It's important to note the president's words telling 4 American congresswomen of color, go back to your own country, is hallmark language of white supremacists." There you go. Rashida Tlaib said, quote, "Want a response to a lawless and complete failure of a president? He is the crisis. He is dangerous. His ideology is in crisis. He needs to be impeached." Ilhan Omar, Congresswoman of Minnesota, "President Trump stoking white nationalism because you are angry that people like us are serving in Congress fighting against your hate-filled agenda. America's answer to the intolerant man is diversity, very diversity, which our heritage of religious freedom has inspired." The African-American Ayanna Pressley, let me get her name right here. Yeah, Ayanna Pressley. Quote, "The impact of the prejudices, bias, and contradictions codified by our founding fathers." Wow, still felt today. "Continue to struggle as a nation to embrace our full history, one that includes family separation of black families at auction block, today migrant, pop, 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 pop." So all the founding fathers were white supremacists, according to Ms. Presley from Massachusetts. Okay, so on the racist front, I'm not going to get into that. You can decide whether President Trump's a racist or not. And when I lay out all the facts in the United States of Trump, 2 months away, by the way, you'll have even more ammunition to make your decision. So I'm not going to, why would I do that? But here's what Newt Gingrich said about the whole thing this morning. Go.
Well, I think the president believes that the more he can get the country to look at the so-called squad, the more he can get them to realize how radical they are and how fundamentally anti-American their views are. In the long run, the better off he is. I think he would like to see them as sort of the front page of the Democratic Party, and I think he thinks anything he does to elevate them is to his net advantage.
And that's true. That's what's going on. It's a political play. To me, I wouldn't have done it that way. I would have focused on the ideology itself, not the women. Because, look, almost every Democratic presidential contender is embracing at least part of the far-left ideology. Every one. That's where I would have kept it, instead of getting into the racism thing. Trump knows, when he says that the media, which is sympathetic to the far left, and they despise Donald Trump, the media will immediately say Trump's a racist. He's got to know that. It's happened 50 times since he's been in office. And of course, the media has. Roll the tape.
4 Democratic congresswomen of color have just spoken publicly as a group for the first time about the racist tweets aimed at them by the President of the United States.
There were some big stories while we were gone. The sun rose in the east. A bear relieved himself in the woods. Donald Trump was racist. And this wasn't just any run-of-the-mill. This was a humdinger. A new personal best in being the worst.
The President of the United States is a racist. His own words leave absolutely no doubt about that. What he is saying is not racially charged. It is flat out racist.
Okay. So it was interesting to see Norah O'Donnell, the new CBS anchor of the evening news, flat out say it was a racist tweet. That's an opinion. That's not a fact. Mr. Lemon's point of view is an opinion, not a fact. Racism is essentially the philosophy of putting one's group above another group. All right, so the best example, most vivid example, is the Third Reich, the Nazi movement in Germany. Now, if you don't know much about it, you got Killing the SS, you got Killing Patton, read the books. But you know what I'm talking about. So Hitler and his minions basically said to the German people and the Austrians and everybody else they occupied, look, we're the master race. We Germans are the master race. They called themselves Aryans. And everybody else is below us. And some races don't deserve to live. Jews, gypsies, homosexuals, whatever it may be, communists, political thing they got in there. So that's racism. That's what racism is. All right, I want to talk to Eddie Ascari. He is the author of the book, Privileged Victims, How America's Cultural Fascists Hijacked the Country and Elevated Its Worst People. It's available for pre-order, comes out in January. Eddie went to the border. He works for the Washington Examiner as a columnist. Went to the southern border. I want to debrief you, Ed, and you're coming to us from Washington, on what you saw. First of all, where'd you go?
We went to El Paso. We saw one facility there, and then we traveled about 30 minutes away to Clint, where they got another facility.
Okay, and who were in these facilities?
In the first one, you got families, so that's if it's husband and wife or man and woman who have a child together. They cross their place in this facility. That's when it's in El Paso. When we got there were about 20 or so people in there. When we went to Clint, about 30 minutes away, that's the unaccompanied minors. So that's just children who show up in Texas on American soil. They take them into custody, and the kids are just by themselves. Or what they do is they separate them from a smuggler or from someone they determine is not their actual guardian or not their actual parent. They put them in there.
There are only 20 in the El Paso detention facility?
In the first one, there was about 20, so that's El Paso, that's the families. In the second one, which was unaccompanied children, there was about 17.
Okay, so that's not a big number. That's not a large number. Were the facilities, were they okay for the in both places?
Yeah, well, first I will say that this was an operation that was conducted by the Public Affairs Department of DHS and ICE. So you take that into account, that these places, I'm sure, were cleaned up and to some degree. But yes, they were very clean facilities. There was food everywhere. There were mattresses for everybody. They weren't overcrowded like we had read about. At one point, they did say, the agents were very forthcoming that yes, they were at one point. They've seen a decrease in June of the number of people who are crossing the border. So they said they were able to kind of get a grasp in that sense. And then also on top of that, they were talking about how with the decrease, they were able to put different systems in place. For example, instead of agents having to prepare food, do the laundry for everyone, they have contracted those things out. So it's a much smoother running process.
Now, the far left doesn't want bail. So if you are arrested, even for a violent crime, you walk. You're arraigned, you're photographed, fingerprinted, out the door. Heading this is Congresswoman Karen Bass, a Democrat, of course. Her district is in Los Angeles. Listen to her. Go.
It's really an embarrassment on our country that we have more people locked up in the United States than any place in the world. And if you look at the many people who are locked up, they're locked up because they're poor, because they can't afford bail or they can't afford proper legal defense. You know, why are people incarcerated just because they can't make bail? Shouldn't people be incarcerated because they're a flight risk? We do that because people are poor. If we just dealt with that aspect alone, we could drastically reduce the prison and the jail population.
Sure, let them out. Look, there's no doubt that poor people, drug-addicted people, commit most of the crimes. Are we supposed to let them? So they have to serve any time in jail after they're arrested because they can't make bail? The judge imposes bail so that people will come back for their hearing or they forfeit the bail. So poor people are supposed to be exempt from that? This is what I mean. This is so crazy. Now, if you were to give Congresswoman Bass the stats I just gave you, and said the reason for this, that drastic crime drop, is because we put them in prison, the criminals, for long periods. Oh, no, that's a human rights violation. What? It's a human rights violation if you hurt somebody, if you sell narcotics, if you rape and murder. That's a human rights violation. But no, because according to Ms. Hunt, if you're poor, then you should be treated differently if you hurt somebody. It's not really your fault. You're poor. What an insult to law-abiding lower income people. Just telling you, this is what is happening. This is what is coming if these people get power.